That was my little kill it with fire animation. In this video, I'm doing a random dip. Originally, I also got that more platinum silver color from Finetech, but I decided not to use it as I progressed because it's pretty expensive and I'd rather just save it for specific stuff, and because I didn't want to mix metallic in with these colors and use a whole separate palette for that, just so that metallic doesn't get mixed in with everything. So instead, I decided to just go with these. I used my old Jazza Arty game app in order to select random colors after having made many different lists of my different watercolors to do from, some of which was involving rolling on those different lists to get the exact color. Not only am I swatching out the colors and labeling them, I'm also doing different mixes. I came back after letting it dry for a while. Some of this was done a little bit at a time, and I made sure to label everything clearly. I used some shorthand in the labeling, however, just to save time. You see the variety of colors you can get. The Shadow Violet 3 mix is a mix I made myself and involves Cobalt Teal Blue and Quinacridone Rose by Van Gogh, and the Cobalt Teal Blue is the Daniel Smith one. It's a separating multi-pigment multiple color mix, and it's also very interesting when mixed with other colors. It ends up giving me a lot of texture, which is really useful for stone formations and adding texture into art. The eye here is done with just a black ballpoint pen and using these various colors. At some portions, like here, I let things dry before coming back and layering more things on. This paper is not supposed to be used with watercolors. It's just a cheap $1 sketchbook, so of course I force it to be used with watercolors anyway, because that's just how I am. The colors are Van Gogh Sepia, which is a mix of PBK7 and PR101, Daniel Smith Permanent Brown, PBR25, Paul Rubens Quinacridone Rose, PV19, a mysterious orange from a really old paint palette. I have no idea what it is. My best guess is actually that it's a cadmium orange because it has a little opacity and it's vibrant and it's actually very old, but I'm not sure what it is. As well as Van Gogh Permanent Lemon Yellow, PY184, and that Shadow Violet mix I already talked about. My only source of blue among any of these colors is the Shadow Violet mix, and the darkness of the sepia leans towards the cool side. In general, these colors are more on the warm side of the palette. However, the Permanent Brown and the Quin Rose are cool versions of their colors. The number 16, which is just from a particular tin where I put a bunch of old paints and new paints and mixes of paints and all sorts of stuff I made together, it showed up randomly that I should do something from this tin, and then I rolled literal dice to figure out what number, and I got this one. So I'm finding that I think a lot of these colors remind me of sword and sorcery art, such as Frank Franzata's work, and it makes me think of sunset. So sunset time of day and sword and sorcery art. So that's what it's putting me in the mind of in order to figure out what final painting I'm going to make. So I decided to pull out good watercolor paper to do a final painting. But before that, I do 2 different palette circles here, which is 2 different versions of it where I flip the colors around and I show you the blends between the colors. There are 4 blends between. I start with primarily one color and add more and more of the next color over and go along, as you can see, until we get to the other color. I start by putting the paint thicker towards the outer edge and water it down with water to pull towards the middle to show a more washed out version of that paint. I keep reusing these same paints I've taken out in the palette when I do my final painting because they're already pre-mixed variants of the colors I used. I cleaned out this old paint palette except for one well. The blue-green well got very stained, I should say. And then I left a little bit of an old mix there that's really pretty that I just think looks really nice as an abstract art. But I cleaned out the rest of this palette's mixing wells. And I'm doing a lot of different mixes here. And I'm learning about the paints. I'm learning about what the color range is that I can get, what the value range is, how dark can I go, how light can I go. And there's a pretty big value range because I can get really dark tones here, and also the yellow is really light, and I can of course lighten all the colors with water to make them very faint and pastel. So as I was working on these is when I really thought it's definitely sword and sorcery themed. So I did a bunch of research. I looked at sword and sorcery art. I did a little bit more practicing. I didn't film, and I drew out a line art on my tablet in Procreate on my iPad, and then I traced over that to get it onto the watercolor paper, but the watercolor paper was so thick that it was actually still difficult to do that. So then I had to do a little erasing, and I had to do a little correcting by looking at the line art and drawing it in on pencil there. So I have it all penciled out, which I didn't record myself doing, and I decided not to include the line art I worked out in Procreate because this video was seeming like it was going to get pretty long anyway. And between this, I do a lot of letting it fully dry. So I did that one layer with a large flat brush of just the yellow to get that color tone over the whole area. Now I'm going back in with the orange clouds and the yellow fade in so that along the horizon line it still keeps the pale. Coming back in here, I'm doing a different stone mix. Now it's using that shadow violet, which is a separating mix, and I'm leaving the shadow of the centaur and I'm leaving the rocks. It was a bit blurry there for some reason. I don't know why it didn't focus properly, but the rest of the video is in focus. I'm doing the near rocks after it fully dries with a very dark mix, permanent brown sepia and the shadow violet, which causes separating and granulating in there, which is actually very beautiful and looks very rock-like. I'm going back in and adding some highlights using mostly the yellow, the permanent lemon yellow. This sort of thing where you pick paints randomly and then make an artwork and do color wheels and do tests and practice mixing them is a really, really good way of learning color mixing and learning the colors and paints you have to work with, as well as working within limitations of a limited palette. And it's really fun, and it also teaches you about what you own and is a really good way of just learning about your colors, about the supplies you own. So I'm going to be doing even more things like this, especially with more upcoming paint and with paint I already own, like I decided to do for this random dip. This is just a random video, even though I had a lot of other videos planned. I'm just like, you know what, I'm going to randomly just do this random dip. And I actually did a lot of research about, I did some research about some centaurs I was looking at. But I also did research about pack saddles, and I actually got a lot of different reference photos of real world pack saddles in order to put proper pack saddles on her. And also the bow and the quiver was done with extra research. And it's really hard to get all the details in because it's actually quite a small painting, but I'm like, no, I'm gonna try. So I take some of my smaller brushes to work on her, and I'm always making sure to let areas completely dry before coming back into stuff. So I'm not going to paint the bag until her body's completely dry, but I painted her human skin and her horse fur completely in because they're not touching in a way. Now I decided to tape it down when I came back in here because it was curling at all the edges and I was kind of getting annoyed with that. I'm making similar but slightly different shades for the bow, making it more yellowish and paler towards the edges of the bow, using more of a sepia tone for the string, getting in with some more of that quinacridone rose mixed in with the permanent brown to make like a very dark red maroon color. And I'm using mixes with a bit of the red tones, the permanent brown and the quin rose, with the mysterious number 16 orange and the permanent lemon yellow to get gold colors. I also watered down a brown tone I mixed using a mix of the orange, yellow, permanent brown, and I think even a touch of the sepia in there. At this point it's just so mixed up that I didn't pay extreme attention to how I was doing the color mixes, just to get the saddlebags and everything in, which is a very pleasant brown. And here's a final look at the finished painting when it's dry. Once again, that's all for this video. If you like my videos, please remember to like, subscribe, and turn on that notification bell to all notifications so you will know when a new video comes up. I aim for new videos every Wednesday, but sometimes life happens and things are delayed. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and we'll see you with another one very soon.